Hello and welcome to another episode of Clarky's Cooking Corner, a family-friendly cooking show. Hit like and subscribe because every time you do, the food gets even more delicious. Today, I have a special guest, my brother Dustin. Dustin, what are we making today?
Today we are making the authentic New England style steak and cheese sandwich.
That's exactly right. Now, in Philadelphia, they call it a cheesesteak, but we're in New England, so we're going to tell it how it is. It's a steak and cheese. What are our ingredients?
Today we will be working with regular cut smoked bacon, a roast, mushrooms, green peppers, onions, sliced American cheese, and cheddar mozzarella.
Absolutely. Let's start getting to prepping, okay? Woo!
It'll make you cry.
Oh, it will.
Oh, diced and onions, so sad.
It is. It's the saddest thing in the world. Now, the reason why I freeze the roast first is because it makes it easier to shave. That's why I freeze the roast first. So you know, you get those thin slices.
Wow. I am amazingly hungry right now.
Yeah, well, it's going to be amazing.
That still looks so amazing.
Now that we have all of our food prepped, what's the next step, Dustin?
Next step is to saute the vegetables.
Yep, we're going to saute the onions and the peppers, and then we're going to add the bacon to that. We want to do the mushrooms last because they're the fastest to cook. So, let's get some olive oil into the pan. Now what I like to do is I like to season it with some salt and pepper. So we're going to let that cook for a little while, and then we're going to add the bacon.
I love how the salt and pepper adds more to the aroma for the peppers and onions.
Yeah. Well, if you didn't know, salt is what really pulls out the flavor, and pepper is what adds the flavor. I didn't know if you knew that.
I did not know that. Definitely more salt and pepper for me.
Let me get this out of the way. Always clean as you go.
And Mike, how long does this saute for before we add the bacon?
You just want to get the onions translucent. When the onions become a little bit translucent, then we add the bacon in there, and then we'll add the steak. Mushrooms last.
Is it because of their density?
What?
The density of the mushrooms?
Yeah, they're very light, so it takes very short amount of time for them to cook. So, if we were to put them in now, by the time, you know, the sandwich was done, they would just be like overcooked. You know, and you don't want to overcook it. You want to be able to taste all the veggies, all the ingredients.
Does the mushroom's dryness also factor in?
Well, if the mushrooms are dry, you don't want to use them. These mushrooms are not dry. They're fresh. Have one if you would like.
Those are good mushrooms.
Yeah. All right, now that the onions are starting to get translucent, let's add some bacon in there. We don't need all the bacon, Dustin.
shall we?
May not be all the bacon you want, but that's all the bacon that we need.
I like to eat a lot of bacon.
Bacon is a great food. But we gotta remember, we're adding steak, we're adding mushrooms. And once you see how we build the steak and cheese, you'll see why we don't need so much, because it's gonna add up to a lot of food.
Interesting.
And remember, I just touched raw meat, so what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna wash my hands, because you don't want to cross-contaminate.
I know, right?
That smells delicious.
It smells divine. I simply love how this looks. The steak looks so very well even cut. It looks like if you were to take steak into a potato chip, well, that's exactly what you did.
Oh, are you trying to make me blush there, Dustin? Is that what you're trying to do?
I simply just love how this looks.
Yep.
I love it.
Well, we gotta wait until we cook it before we eat it.
Unfortunately, Mike. When you really think about it, making this recipe alone, it can definitely make your kitchen smell like a deli.
Absolutely. I actually got this recipe from a deli.
That is a very incredible coincidence.
Right, now that the bacon is almost fully cooked off, we're gonna start adding the steak.
I can see now that the steak is added much later because you want the juices of the vegetables and the bacon to actually get absorbed into the steak.
You want all the flavors to marry themselves. You don't want to put it all just in the pan at once.
That is very important to know. It's a steak in a blanket of deliciousness. One can never have enough steak, Mike. Well, we certainly like our steak and cheese sandwiches quite large, don't we, Mike?
Because it really all depends on how big you want your steak and cheese. And we have very large rolls, so.
What's funny is that they actually do look like miniature steaks. That I actually think is pretty cute.
I see exactly what
looks.
you're talking about.
How long would you say the steak and cheese cooking process takes?
Depending on the meat and how you're cooking it, it takes about 15-20 minutes. The cooking process. Well, I mean, and then you have to toast it, unless you don't like toasted steak and cheese. But I don't know about you. I love toasted steak and cheese.
At this point, it's very, very juicy.
Yes. Well, that's why you use tongs, because then you can pull it out. But now that the steak is almost done, we can add our mushrooms.
And we haven't even added cheese.
Right. I told you, once everything gets in there, it's going to build into a bigger sandwich than you think. So to add a little extra flavor, I like to use some granulated onion and some garlic powder. A little bit more salt and pepper. Now the steak's starting to fall apart.
It's getting more and more delicious by the minute.
that not smell good or not.
Amazing.
It smells absolutely terrific, Mike.
Yeah. So what I'm going to do right now to finish cooking it off, speed up the process, is I'm going to put a lid on it. That way it'll kind of steam itself. So the reason why I make the steak and cheese the way I make the steak and cheese is because this local market around the corner used to make it like this with the owners when I was a child. And I just loved this steak and cheese so much that I memorized the recipe, and I can't have a steak and cheese without comparing it to this steak and cheese. This is how amazing I feel this steak and cheese is. And I think Dustin can concur.
I don't think anyone can disagree with how divine this steak and cheese is. Something that I really dislike about having sandwich after sandwich, I keep getting lots and lots of lettuce and tomato, and for me, it just becomes really boring for me. And steak and cheese is really always my go-to sandwich because it doesn't have all of that lettuce and tomato that every other sandwich would normally have. And it also, when you actually load it onto a sandwich of this size, it really feels like I'm having more of the insides of it than actual bread itself ratio. It's always come out juicy and proper and even, and literally every time after I eat this sandwich, I feel like I have so much energy.
Yeah. Every time I eat this sandwich, it brings me back to being a child.
I like to look at this steak and cheese as the Christmas turkey on the 4th of July, but it's currently January.
But it's currently January. Yeah. No, absolutely. Absolutely. It's a beautiful sandwich, and you guys will not be disappointed by this sandwich.
My. You cannot argue with this.
Now that the steak is done, it's time to build our sandwich. So, let's get to building our sandwiches.
I note on the broth, some people do like their steak and cheese sandwiches a little bit more greasier than others.
Well, we're using 3 different cheeses and mayonnaise, so this is going to be juicy and greasy. Now, what we could do is we could take this juice, use it for dipping. You could take the juice and turn it into an au jus to dip your steak and cheese in if you wanted to.
So, Mike, how do you build the authentic New England style steak and cheese?
Well, I'm about to show you. First, you want to start off with your bread. Nice French roll. Make sure it's fresh. I'm going to use a bread knife. Cut it open. Now you want to start off with your mayonnaise. Then you add 2 pieces of American cheese. Then you want to take your steak, or your sandwich filling,
I'm going to attempt to not do the John Goodman. That's the best I can do.
what's that? And then your cheddar mozz mix. And that, before it goes into the oven, is how you want your New England steak and cheese to look like. So we're going to finish making the other sandwiches, then we're going to tray them up, throw them in the oven. The oven is set at 425 degrees, and all you really want to do is cook it until the cheese is melted golden brown. So now that we have the sandwiches made, it's time for the last step. What's the last step, Dustin?
Our last step is to put the sandwiches in the oven and toast them.
That's right. We have the oven set at 425 degrees because all we want to do is brown the cheese. The bottom cheese will melt. And we don't want to ruin the bread, so we just want to melt the cheese.
Part of me kind of feels like I just sent a kid off to school.
It's okay. They'll be back.
Doesn't mean I'm going to miss them.
They're gone forever.
It's like, don't worry. They'll be back.
That's right.
Yeah, but I still miss them. Bringing the deli home or bringing home the deli.
So now that we have our steak and cheese done, there's one final thing that I like to do. I take some parchment paper, smush it together, and roll it. Now the reason why I do that is because it just locks everything in together, so once you unroll it, it's more manageable, easier to eat. All right. Cheers. Thank you for watching. See you next time.